The 2025 NHL Draft is now complete. All the picks have been made. Some trades have been made as well, but there's still plenty of rumors circulating on what could happen over the next few days leading into free agency. The big rumor of the day today we're going to focus on is Mitch Marner going to Vegas in a sign and trade. Plus, at the draft, there was this crazy rumor circulating about the future of Sidney Crosby and whether or not he would entertain going to another team. So we'll discuss where that came from and what we've learned about it since. Plus, lots of other trade talk around Vancouver, Montreal, LA, Buffalo, the Rangers, St. Louis, and a few others. Plus, we have a few other smaller deals to take a look at. There were a few small trades that took place at the draft that we haven't yet discussed. Plus, we have some signings, and I want to discuss the whole concept of the draft and if we could see changes going forward coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, the draft is now complete. We've had a fair bit of activity, but there's still plenty more that we could see here in the coming days leading into free agency. And we've had a pretty couple of really big rumors going around over the past day or so about some of the things that we could see. And we're going to get into the crazy Crosby rumor that was going around, the Marner to Vegas and all that in just a minute. First, we got some other news items that I want to discuss here. First, of course, it was the first version of, you want to call it the decentralized draft, for all NHL teams had their headquarters in their home cities at their normal offices and arenas, and of course, so it was different the way the NHL set it up. For the first round especially, the players would come down to the stage. They would be given a hat and a jersey. They would take a picture with Gary Bettman, and of course, some teams had a guest person there to announce the pick. So in some cases, you had the picks between Bettman, the player, and their guest speaker or whatever. And then from there, the player was whisked over to a different room where they would look at a screen where the team that drafted him would be there. They could have a quick conversation with the GM and some of the staff. And then they would do a quick player interview with the person doing the interviews there. And then bang, we're back to the panel, get ready for the next pick, because there's 3 to 5 minutes in between picks. So ultimately, it was okay. Aesthetically, it looked nice. The screens, like the setup of it was okay. But I find it took way too long. The first round was brutally slow. For it to last, I don't know how long it actually ended up being. I think it was over 4.5 hours. The general feeling is this is going to be a one and done, and don't go back to the old format next year. Gary Bettman said before numerous times, the league does not care how the teams want to do it. As whoever is, like, whatever the majority of the feeling is what they'll do. The belief is that they had a vote last year to change the format, and it was a 26-6 vote. So there wasn't a whole lot of teams that were in favor of keeping it the way it was. A lot of teams wanted to change it, but the general feeling now is that it just didn't go off as easily and smoothly as they wanted. There were tech issues, with glitching. Some players went to talk to the team that drafted them in the other room there off the main stage, and it was just like freezing up and glitching. And I don't know. It wasn't the worst ever, but it certainly was a lot better before. And to be honest, after having it at the Sphere last year, that was just an amazing production. So, that was hard to live up to. Let's just put it that way. And it sounds like the most likely scenario is that they will probably vote again coming here soon and probably go back. At least I hope so. I like the old format much better myself. Now, lots of other news today besides the trades that we've already got on the channel here. We had some signings. We had Washington Capitals sign Justin Sourdif to a 2-year contract. Of course, they acquired him from the Florida Panthers. Just in the past 48 hours here. He gets a 2-year contract, $825,000. The Capitals apparently have been trying to acquire him for a couple years now, and they finally get their guy. Hasn't really been much more than an American Hockey Leaguer with a small amount of call-up time so far. We'll see if things can materialize further for him in Washington. The Calgary Flames extended defenseman Kevin Bahl today on a 6-year extension valued at $5.35 million. That's a pretty hefty commitment from the team, and it's a pretty hefty contract. Obviously, they're pretty high on Kevin Bahl to be a top 4 defenseman moving forward. It's a decent contract. I do have a little bit of concerns over it being an overpayment, but some of these contracts for players that are not as established or still on the younger side of things, the first longer term deals can be a little bit iffy sometimes because it's all based on kind of what you project a player to be in a few years down the road, the cap going up and all that. Some of them sometimes sound like a little much, but end up being just fine. And I hope for Calgary's sake, this is one of those situations. The Winnipeg Jets today also announced they've extended Hayden Fleury. 2-year contract, $950,000. That's a pretty good contract there. Fleury was, I think, a good fit with the Jets this past year. And St. Louis extended RFA goaltender Joel Hofer to a 2-year contract with a cap hit of $3.4 million. And of course, because he was an RFA and could have been subject to an offer sheet, especially where the Blues were the ones handing out the offer sheets last offseason, the Blues at least had a good sense of humor about it when they announced this trade on their Twitter account. They did make mention that he's no longer available for offer sheets. So I like to see teams on their socials have a good personality and sense of humor, and Hofer's locked up, so he won't be going anywhere. We did have some other trades that did get completed today, as I mentioned, some on the channel. There's a couple of small ones as well that I haven't discussed yet. The first one of the day was the Ottawa Senators acquiring young right shot defenseman Jordan Spence from the Los Angeles Kings for a 3rd round pick in the 2025 draft, so this year, and a 6th round pick in next year's draft. Jordan Spence is a pretty solid right shot D. He's young. I think he's still like 24. Looking for more of an opportunity. Basically, there were times last year when he played a fair bit with the LA Kings because it seemed like he was paired with Gavrikov a decent amount. But then there were also times when he wasn't in the lineup all the time. And seems like the team basically kind of feels like they don't want to have Spence and Brandt Clarke both in the lineup at the same time. Is kind of the general feeling, and they obviously prefer Clark's I think upside a little bit more. I mean, Brandt Clarke does project to be a really good offensive D. Not that Spence can't be, but I think Brandt's offensive skill set's a little higher, and I think Spence's defensive skill set is a little bit higher. So we'll see about how things work out here. This does a couple of things though for Ottawa. Brings in some more depth and insurance. We know Nick Jensen, who's in his mid-30s, has had a major surgery for like a hip injury, and the injury was more severe than most people knew. And once they kind of became more public knowledge, it was like, oh, okay, that's pretty serious. Now, there's already been some social media videos posted by his wife out rollerblading and stuff. So obviously he's recovering well, but just because he's out rollerblading with the kids doesn't mean he's able to play an NHL hockey game. And the belief is still that he will be likely a little bit late ready to start the season. So at least they don't have to go into the beginning of the season if he's not ready and be like, oh geez, like, we have a big hole in our lineup. And like I said, he's used to playing with a guy like Gavrikov. So if he were to get paired with a guy like Sanderson, for example, or something, like, it could be a really good situation. And long term, on the right side of Ottawa's D, they've got Jensen, they've got Zub, but they're already a little bit older. I mean, Jensen is only signed for one more year, being in his mid-30s. So, for example, if he doesn't stick around beyond that, then maybe Spence will kind of slide right into that spot. I mean, and at the very least, he'll compete with Matt and Powell for the third pair if everybody's healthy. Spence might have an edge that way, and it just gives them more depth and more, more stability back there, because they don't want to take a step back defensively after making some big strides last year. I know I did see some Kings fans on the trade when it was still in the rumored section. It wasn't confirmed yet, hoping they were going to get a player like Drake Batherson or somebody coming back. Some of them are pretty disappointed with just getting 2 picks, but for a player like Spence, you're not going to get a top 6 forward. But a great pickup by Ottawa. I mean, they moved back from the first round, from pick 21. They moved back a few spots in the first round. They get an extra pick, and that extra pick is the one they flipped to LA for Jordan Spence. And of course, they still got their preferred player that they were looking to draft at that point in the first round was Logan Hensler. So really, all in all, it was a nice piece of business there by Steve Staios, I think. We also finally saw the John Gibson trade. It's finally happened after almost 2 years of rumors that he would be wanting out of Anaheim. Good buddies and former co-workers, Pat Verbeek and Steve Yzerman, hook up on a trade, sending Gibson to Detroit for Peter Mrazek and a second and fourth round pick. Those picks were not in this year's draft. They were over the next 2 drafts. So a couple of picks and Mrazek. No salary retention on that deal at all. So John Gibson is expecting to be the starter or the part of the solution to stabilize things in Detroit. So we'll see how things work out. They now have Cam Talbot and John Gibson under contract. Alex Lyons, a UFA. At this point, the belief is that they'll go with Gibson and Talbot as a tandem next year, but we'll see what else Yzerman's got up his sleeve here. In Buffalo and Pittsburgh also pulled off a trade as well, with Buffalo trading defenseman Connor Clifton and a second rounder, pick 39 in this year's draft, to Pittsburgh for defenseman Connor Timmins and Isaac Beliveau. So Connor Timmins has been moved by Kyle Dubas again. So Timmins for Clifton, essentially, with a couple other pieces there in the mix. And then we also saw a trade with the Minnesota trading Declan Chisholm and pick number 180 to the Washington Capitals for defensive player Chase Prisky and pick 123. And then we also saw Chicago trade prospect Ilya Safonov, who was originally drafted by the Blackhawks back in 2021, has been playing in the KHL. He's 24 years old, has never come over. He still has 1 year left on his KHL contract, but the belief is that he will come over next year. So Safonov's been traded from Chicago to Vancouver for future considerations. Essentially, the Blackhawks feel like he's not going to sign with them, and the hope is that he will sign with Vancouver when his contract expires. He'll be 25 by that point, but he is a 6'5", over 200-pound centerman that looks to be a decent two-way, decent offensive skill. I don't think he's going to be like a high-end player, but he could be somebody, by the looks of things, that they hope might be able to play in the middle of their lineup. So we'll see where that goes, but a few smaller trades there as well. So and lots of pick trading as well. People, teams moving up, moving down, and all kinds of jockeying for position in that sense. So with the rumors, I'm going to start with the Crosby rumor. There was a ridiculous rumor going around on the first night of the draft, during the first round, that Sidney Crosby is actually considering leaving the Penguins and will entertain playing for another club. So now this came from a couple of sources. Some of them were a little bit more explicit in their words. Some of them were kind of hinting at things, but it was Georges Larac, former NHLer and part of Montreal media landscape, who first put it out there. And there was also a tweet from Kevin Weeks that kind of, now his was less direct, but kind of insinuated that could also be brewing. So when you get multiple reporters, and both previous NHL players, both we know are connected, and it just kind of makes you scratch your head and go, really? So a lot of people were like, wow, could this really be? Now, last night, before the first round was even over, so I'm going to say probably because it was so darn long, probably about halfway through, somebody had posted on Instagram a snapshot of these posts from X showing what these other people were saying, and that Crosby may be considering leaving the Penguins. And his good buddy Nate McKinnon actually commented on it and said, fake news. So like, okay, Nate McKinnon is really tight with Sidney Crosby, and a lot of people wonder if Crosby ever did leave Pittsburgh, that maybe he'd team up with his best buddy there in Colorado. If Nate is out there willing to say publicly that it's not happening and it's fake news, we'll take Nate's word for it. So that kind of shut things down for the night. And then there were some of the Pittsburgh reporters obviously wanted to look into it as well. They checked with a combination of Kyle Dubas, the GM, as well as I think it was his agent as well, Pat Brisson. So depending on the reporter, they checked with a variety of different people, and everybody was kind of shutting it down. So the Crosby rumor was getting a lot of attention, raising a lot of eyebrows for a few hours, but turned out to be kind of premature. Now, Frank Saravalli has since made some comments on the situation, and he didn't completely shut it down, but based on what he had heard, it basically sounded like more like, not immediately, but that Crosby might be more willing now to entertain playing for another NHL team before he retires. So The belief is that this is going to be the final season for Evgeny Malkin. He's got 1 year left on his contract. There's already been numerous reports indicating that the Penguins are not going to offer him a new contract, so that even if he wanted to stay in Pittsburgh and play longer, they're not going to offer that for him. So it's either he retires, goes to the KHL, goes to another NHL team, whatever. We don't know what Malkin's going to do, but this is going to be it for him as a Penguin. So the belief is that with his age, he's going to be around close to 40 years old. He's probably going to say, okay, I'm done. And maybe he plays in Russia, maybe he doesn't. I don't know. But Frank was saying that where Malkin is playing this year, that he will want to kind of ride that out with him. But after this season is done and Malkin ends up not being a Penguin anymore, that at that point, the belief is that maybe he would consider moving then. So again, that's a year away, probably very premature, and I don't know obviously who Frank's source is on that, so we'll see. But for right now, the Crosby rumors, if you've seen them for the time being, are definitely not true. There is no real reason to think he's going to be traded this summer, and I guess we'll say after Malkin is done, maybe those odds change a little bit, but I think that far out is probably hard to say. Now, lots of other stuff going around the NHL here today. Of course, we know the LA Kings traded Jordan Spence today. They appear to be at risk of losing Gavrikov in free agency. Ken Holland did confirm that Gavrikov is expected to test free agency on July 1. Typically, when players go that far, they rarely go back to their teams. It does happen on occasion, but the belief is, based on what Ken Holland said, that he's going to be looking to add at least one defenseman, maybe even two as far as depth goes. There's also some speculation that the LA Kings have interest in some of the Penguin forwards that are believed to be available. We know that there's been lots of rumors that Kyle Dubas would like to move on from a couple of veteran forwards in the Penguins lineup, with Brian Rust getting a lot of attention, to some degree Rickard Rakell as well. So the belief is Kings have different levels of interest in each of those players. I know Buffalo also were reportedly a team that had a lot of interest in Brian Rust as well. So we'll see what happens in LA. But yeah, expect them to be defenseman shopping to some degree. And we'll see. I know one of the D-men that is still on the market and believe that the team would still prefer a trade is New York Rangers defenseman K'Andre Miller. He needs the contract as a restricted free agent. The belief is that LA has interest in him. So if in Gavrikov, the main teams I've heard linked to Gavrikov are the Rangers and the Blue Jackets. So we'll see about that. Of course, he used to play for Columbus before, but K'Andre Miller could end up in LA. It is a possibility, or they may have to go into free agency and kind of see what they can find. But they're going to be looking for somebody to take Gavrikov's spot, essentially, and they might be looking to make forward upgrades if they can as well. Now, in Montreal, of course, we know yesterday they pulled off the big Noah Dobson trade with the New York Islanders, and with that now, looking at their decor roster, there's some belief that they would consider moving Mike Matheson. Now, of course, that's not 100% confirmed, but based on what they have for defensemen, they have too many. There's just no doubt about that anymore. That for them to trade at least one D over the next few days or before next season starts at the very least would not be surprising in the least. But given Matheson's age, his contract, and everything, it's reasonable to think that he might be a guy, because we know that the Montreal Canadiens are still looking for a number 2 center. And we already know that they've kind of used some of their draft currency from this year. They had multiple first-round picks, and of course they used those on the Dobson deal. So they're not going to be able to use this year's draft currency anymore, because it's used for a number 2 center. They still have a lot of prospects, though, so it's not like they don't have anything else. But depending on where they get this player, if they can find them, that if they want a more experienced player, Matheson might be the guy. There was some talk about Gallagher's name being out there as well. I've seen mixed reports. Some say he is, some say he isn't. I think it would be a difficult contract to move. And actually, based on last year, he didn't do as bad. So I don't think Gallagher is going to end up going anywhere. But Matheson, I would say, is a little bit more reasonable to think that could be something we see. In Vancouver, there's still a lot of mixed feelings about what's going to happen with Thatcher Demko. There's some that think that there's a better chance he gets traded, and there's some people that think there's a better chance he gets signed. There is apparently ongoing negotiations on a contract, and if they get a deal done before July 1st, then clearly he'll stay. And if they don't, then, obviously they might look to move him, but I think they'll continue negotiating because obviously he's not a free agent here, so he's going into the final year of his deal. He couldn't sign anything before July 1, so the belief is that they'll probably negotiate with him up until that point and see if they can get something done, and if they can't, then at that point they will possibly consider a trade. But there are definitely still teams looking for goaltending upgrades. I look at Edmonton, I look at Columbus, there's Philadelphia. For sure, those three teams, probably it could be a few others too that I'm not thinking of right now. So there would definitely be a market for him to be moved, but it's not clear yet which direction that's going to go. In St. Louis, there's still, like I said, Jordan Kyrou's name has been out there. They definitely have had discussions around trading him. I don't think it's a firm foregone decision that's already been made that they want to move him. I think it's more of a case of looking at the roster and saying, do we want a little bit more of a turnover here? Do we feel that Jimmy Snuggerud could maybe be a Kyrou replacement in short order? Do we consider moving the Kyrou contract before his no trade kicks in and we lose all of our leverage? So there's all of those things kind of being considered. The belief is that if they were going to move Kyrou, that they might want a package back that would include a defenseman and maybe even a D and a forward, depending on what level of quality each player was. There was some belief that Montreal was in the Kyrou conversation, but I believe that was before the Dobson trade. I wouldn't think that they would make that kind of move now, given that they got Dobson, which is not a player we really expected them to target a couple weeks back, and they've done that, which kind of came out of nowhere. Like, it was probably something that they didn't expect to be available to them either, and now they still need a number 2 center. So I think they're less likely to go after a winger and find a centerman. So I know, like I said, they had inquired before based on intel we've seen, but it looks like that's probably not something they're pursuing right now. But there was definitely a number of teams that at least had talked to St. Louis on that. I know I would include the Islanders in that conversation. I would include, probably to some degree, I think Boston might have been in there too. But we'll see where things go. Bo Byram in Buffalo is another player to watch. Still expected to be traded. Up until last night, the belief was that the Sabres were getting enough interest. They just didn't love the offers enough to pull the trigger. There was some that Vancouver was in the mix. Obviously, like I said, they're weighing out options in case they lose Quinn Hughes down the road, so he would be some Quinn Hughes insurance. Columbus is pretty much in on every defenseman because it's believed that they want to add 1 or 2 with experience here, so that's why you keep hearing their name until they're successful at landing one. If Aaron Ekblad makes it to free agency, I fully expect Columbus to be in on him too. To some degree as well with Byram, the Kings are a potential landing spot. Columbus, Vegas had inquired as well, and I think that one of the ones that might be a little bit underrated here, but what about Chicago? There was some belief that Chicago might be a place for Byram. And if he really wants to play like a top pair defenseman and get paid like one, it might be a good spot. I mean, especially now that they got rid of the Seth Jones contract. What if, because they have a few more D there that could go to Buffalo to change up their mix, that could give them, just like they did when they got Kesselring and the Peterka trade. As much as I don't love that trade, Kesselring is a good pickup. And I don't want to devalue him because he is a really kind of like a sneaky good player here. And if they can keep Dahlin and Power on the left side of their D and give them the right shot pair defenseman to pair with them to kind of strengthen that top 4, they might be in a much better shape. You throw Kesselring into one. What about a guy like, say, Connor Murphy? Would the Sabres entertain? I mean, I don't think it would be straight up 1-for-1. That's not what I'm saying, but maybe Chicago puts a package together, so that they get Murphy and a prospect or something going back for Byram. I do wonder if that's a real possibility, because otherwise we've heard Vancouver, Columbus, LA, Vegas, but that would be contingent on Vegas maybe moving somebody out, and that hasn't happened. We know Hag is a likely piece, which we'll discuss here too in a minute. In free agency, Brock Boeser is linked to a number of teams. It's not expected he's going to go back to Vancouver. There's been some belief that he would be interested in Winnipeg. Winnipeg, actually, for a lot of players that are from the state of Minnesota, depending on what part of the state they're from, sometimes Winnipeg is still convenient to home if you want to be close to home, but not necessarily playing for the Wild. So I don't know that he's for or against playing for the Minnesota Wild. He's been linked to them forever, and it wouldn't be a shocker if he landed there. But there is some belief about the Jets, especially if they lose Ehlers. If they sign Ehlers, then probably not. But the belief is Ehlers going to free agency is going to test the market. So Boeser might be a fallback option for the Winnipeg to turn to if they can't keep Ehlers. There's been some that said Edmonton and Ottawa could be landing spots for Boeser as well. Like with Ottawa, a lot of it will depend if they re-sign Claude Giroux. If they bring back Giroux, then they probably don't go to market for a guy like Boeser. And I can see them having interest in Boeser, but they might prefer a different contract. It would be more like if he's not getting what he wants and he'll settle, maybe they get him like a short-term deal. I don't know. It depends on what Boeser wants. And even Edmonton. So Ottawa, Edmonton, Winnipeg, Minnesota, and even LA. LA wants at least to add a forward. And if Boeser's one of the bunch of guys that they're kind of look like they're kind of considering. When it comes to Ehlers, a lot of people think that Carolina might be a really good spot that we see offer him a good contract as well. We know Carolina is heavily interested in Mitch Marner, who we're going to talk about now, but they're not expected to be a contender based on Mitch's preferences. Now, the big rumor going through today is that the Toronto Maple Leafs and Vegas Golden Knights, for a big chunk of today, were engaged in sign and trade conversations, which would make Mitch Marner, if it happened, a Vegas Golden Knight ahead of free agency. And it would get Toronto something in return, rather than have him walk for nothing. So if he's going to go anyway, if Brad Treliving can get anything for him, that's a good piece of business. I don't care if it's a third-round pick. It's something. It's an asset that you drafted, developed, and have done so much for your franchise. When it comes to all the points and all the franchise goals and everything that he's done there, like losing him for nothing would really suck. Now, I understand they feel like they need to change things up, change their mix, change their DNA. I get all that, and you know what? I can see from Mitch's standpoint why it might be time for a change too. But strictly from an asset management and a business perspective, to lose an asset of that quality for no return, it just sucks. It's just that simple, and I'm sure Leaf fans would agree with that. So if you can get anything back, it's better than nothing. But the belief is that, of course, we know Vegas is kind of a little bit tight to the cap. We're still waiting on clarity for the health of Alex Pietrangelo. So we don't know if there's a possibility he doesn't play next year, or at least a big chunk of it. So we don't know what their LTIR availability is going to be. And the rumor is that they were talking about a Marner sign and trade where the Toronto Maple Leafs were asking, and I don't know, obviously it hasn't happened yet, so we're not there, but it was believed they were looking for, at the very least, Nikolai Waugh, so Nick Waugh from Vegas, who's a pretty good number 3 center, doesn't make a ton of money, but effective at what he does, and Nick Hague, RFA left shot defenseman. The belief was that they might have been asking for both. Some of the insiders think that it was more likely that they would just get Nick Waugh. And that would free up a little bit of cap space for the Golden Knights, make things a little bit easier to sign Marner. But there's been a lot of different rumors from a lot of different insiders about what the contract would be for Marner. I think Dave Pagnotta said he expected him to sign a 4-year contract and around like $12-something million. I'm like, what's the benefit of doing a sign and trade if you're not going to take the 8 years? The only benefit of signing with your existing club is that you get that 8th year, and then you get to go where you want, like we saw with Matthew Tkachuk, for example. That's why these don't happen a lot. So, okay, that's all fine and dandy, but like, you're helping Toronto out for nothing. Absolutely nothing. Now, if Vegas feels like they absolutely need to clear some cap space,
and they want to make sure that they don't have to, maybe if they're having a hard time finding another deal they like, maybe they figure it might be easier to deal with Toronto. Because like I said, we don't know the Alex Pietrangelo situation and what have you, so it's a little bit complicated. So, yeah, but the Marner camp is looking for the best deal here. We know his agent, Darren Ferris, drives a hard bargain. We don't know exactly what they're looking for. We've heard that they want a 4-year contract, a 5-year contract. Some think now that they're talking this, that maybe they'll go 8 years. I'm still not convinced they will. But at the end of the day, no matter what the contract is, if they can do this sign and trade and they get Waugh or Hag or combination of that, then it's a win-win situation for the Leafs. Now, Hag, to me, I don't know. I mean, with what the Leafs have on their decor, I don't know that he's really going to upgrade anything, to be completely honest. So maybe it's better that they just focus on Waugh. I mean, I don't know how they would kind of do their lineup, and it's probably going to depend if they get another centerman or not. Maybe Tavares will still be the 2C. There was a lot of talk that they might want to move him to the wing or down to the third line, something along those lines. But if they get Waugh, he would be the 3C. So I'm not sure how they would do that. Obviously, there'd be other things that they're going to do here probably in the next couple of days, which will probably answer those questions. But it sounds like it's a real possibility. We could see a sign and trade where the Leafs get something. Marner becomes a Golden Knight on some sort of longer-term contract, and it would kind of take things away from July 1st, but it would get everybody in that situation what they want. So let me know your thoughts on all of today's news and rumors in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.